So what do you think about 2020?
To be honest,
the first half of 2020.
It was good. I will say this. The first half was actually picking up really good speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the news kicked in about COVID.
Right.
Then it kind of went downhill a little bit. But, honestly, I don't think it really stopped us, did it? It just
not at all.
Peaking up. It went to the bottom very quickly, and then it snapped right back up.
I'll agree. And it definitely forced both of us to think outside of the box. Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to keep things moving forward? And, particularly with WIIS, I feel like we almost kickstarted it because of COVID. We reached out to how many people to help us out with the newsletter and social media, membership. And I feel like because we were sort of stuck at home looking for things to do and sort of self-motivating to keep it going, I think it was a little bit of a fire under our butt, right?
It is. And I think the other thing that we did really, that I probably should really talk about is the mission, because you and I have talked about this for a long time, of setting the mission right. So people will be willing to pursue and actually volunteer for the cause, right? I think big things is, and maybe this is something that would be interesting, is the fact that, one, we did all this because, one, we felt that we needed a platform like this for WIIS.
Sure.
I think with COVID, it helped us really, like I said, lit a fire under our butts to kind of get the shit going. And it really did. I think we've both been very busy, but this has been on the top tier of our agenda items to kind of keep moving forward so that way we get it going.
Right. You know what else I love that we did? We really made an effort to give everyone their own voice and allow them to sort of do what they wanted to do. We kind of gave them the reins in each of their respective areas, whether it was the newsletter or social media or membership or whatever. The task force. I love the task force. I love that we try to stay away from the whole messaging around mentorship and really created that subject matter expert perspective. I think that's so important if you're trying to give someone the platform to create and learn and become a subject matter expert, as opposed to having that subservient, I am the mentee, teach me all you know kind of thing.
What is it?
It has its place, but we're trying to give someone a voice or encourage them to have their voice, develop their voice in any aspect of security that they're interested in.
But you raised a really good point though, over there, that whole holier than thou, I know more than you, this is why I'm mentoring you type attitude, which I think in a respect has to really be reevaluated, I think is the way of putting it, right? How many times have someone gone to someone and says, oh my God, you're such an expert at your field. Have they been turned down and say, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. You move along and find something else to do. And I don't think that's fair to anyone, right? Especially if you want to start developing people from early on who has an interest in the field, and suddenly they got turned away because of your attitude. So what you just said there is extremely important. The reevaluation of mentorship needs to be taken another look at, because I can say confidently we both have very eclectic backgrounds.
For sure.
And I can say there's a lot of middle management or senior level people who have jumped careers because they can't stand what they're doing. So this whole idea of professional development or subject matter expertise in terms of training is a critical point that I think any organization to have, and not call it mentorship.
And it sounds like you can speak firsthand in terms of jumping careers to develop that part of your voice. So, and I think everyone can kind of relate to that. I like the aspect of, I'm sure you've heard the idea around leadership in terms of, leaders sort of enable other leaders, right? So that whole idea of, a supervisory role and having your subordinates has changed with that concept of, I want to be a leader to encourage other people to lead and to take on different initiatives and stuff like that. So, I think we've adopted that really, really well.
Which I'm very appreciative, and I'm sure a lot of members actually appreciate that.
Yeah.
Interesting you brought that up though. So it was a question that was given to me earlier about, do you feel it's beneath you if someone comes and asks you a question because they're not that high enough?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to see what a lot of the listeners or a lot of folks would actually, how would they would answer that question, especially if you were in a position and someone that's, you know, an entry-level position comes and asks you a question. Would you turn them away, or would you say, all right, let me answer your question and let me ask your question. Let me answer it appropriately so maybe I can guide you. And that will be a very interesting question to pose to our listeners and say, if you were given this question, how would you react to it?
Mm-hmm.
How would you react to it, Elisa?
Right. How would I react to it? I mean, you know, I definitely think that I give, again, a unique perspective. There's not a lot of folks like us in the industry. So, you know, I look at things from a certain perspective and, you know, but I never claim to have all the answers, not by a long shot. You know, I think all of my best answers really to any question just encourage people to sort of think about things differently. That's all. Whether it's right or wrong, you know, again, I don't have all the answers, but whether it's right or wrong, what if we could do it this way? If everyone else is doing something like this, how differently can we do this? You know, how can we do it in a different way? And, you know, you and I, to go into one of our next topics, we have a couple of our own individual and collaborative efforts that we're keeping under wraps. And that's a big part of it. You know, we, both of us, respectively have looked at the market and said, there are a lot of manufacturers, there are a lot of partners that we've dealt with over the years that do things in a very, very specific way. And it's been done this way forever. And it's just the way it is. And I think by us pushing those questions of, well, how else could we do it? Would it benefit if we did it differently? Who would it benefit if we did it differently? And, you know, I think over the next few months, as we announce some of our collaborative efforts, it'll start to become more clear about how differently we can pursue some of the work that we do, you know, in security and manufacturing, software, hardware, everything across the board.
Agreed.
You know, and I think the industry is desperate for new perspectives. I really do.
And change. I think the other thing is change, you know, with post-COVID and the new changes that we have to adopt in the new norm, or they like to call the new norm. I don't see it as a new norm, but but change is good. I think change is going to be important and relevant in this industry that we're in, especially now that we're starting to look at going back to the offices and how people are now going to have to adopt new strategies to actually be able to work in a closed environment that we were forced to move away from, right? Really. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're going to be announcing in the next couple of months will be very interesting to see how people react to that. But, you know, I think so too. It'll be good working together. Let's just put it that way.
I'm so excited. This is, honestly, I cannot remember a time that I've been more excited in my career. So I think we got a lot of really good things cooking, and I think it's going to be well received. So
good. No, I think so too. I mean, I've been getting a lot of phone calls, which is great. Yeah. So there's plenty of opportunities and a lot of fish to catch.
Oh yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the podcast though. So what do you think about, you know, we talked a little bit with Lee about what we're hoping to see for the podcast moving forward. What are your thoughts?
I think for this initial one, I really want to see this more like a talk show. I'm going to say talk show in a sense that it's relevant, number one, and two, relatable. Not just to the security professionals, but also to someone who doesn't understand security and wants to get into security, or even a parent at home who should understand security and want to know about security. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of topics out there and all the stuff that we're doing that has not been touched on at a very grassroots level that I think needs to be established. And maybe this, or even this podcast, what we're doing, a video cast that we're doing, can help push that envelope a little bit for even teachers, parents. I should take a look at it and say, you know what, we really need to think about this. This is something like a critical issue that we never talked about. I mean, one of the upcoming webinars that we're working on, if you think about it, is such a critical piece that affects a lot of families that don't even consider it important or may not even be.
Absolutely.
So this is a platform that I think would help hopefully push that forward, not as a educational, these are the steps you have to take, but more as a candid level of conversation that I think would be more relevant to the typical individual that's out there.
Yeah, no, totally agreed. And, you know, even if it just raises a little bit of awareness with folks that are not in the industry, right? You know, when we wrote that article recently and you talked about, you know, how you dug into the app that your daughter was using and figured out just how unsecure and how exposed everyone who uses that platform is. How often does that happen with the large majority of parents out there? Almost
Very
never.
often.
Almost never.
You're right. No, almost never. But if bringing a little awareness like this is so important, right? Especially, you know, with both parents. We both have young children, and you being in your expertise and mine being in mine, not many parents understand that. And I think that's important that has to be brought out to the open. I think all the other conversations that people don't typically talk about needs to be brought into the open. So hopefully this can do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. You know, we hear in the industry, no matter what the organization is, there's a very sort of set, again, authoritative figures that will share their perspectives, but it's rare that you get someone from that parenting perspective or their caretaker perspective, or, you know, just the average everyday citizen. Even from the female perspective, there are tons of technologies out there that if you're a female and you're traveling, if you are working late at night, whatever it is, there are ways that you can protect yourself using technology. And there's so many people that just don't even think about it. So if it's a conversation, casual conversation, somebody listens to it and gets them thinking, that's great.
That's great. Exactly. But you know, like what you said, there's also the negativities of working with technology. I mean, I don't know, this was actually in the Asian papers for quite some time, where there was an app in China that was very similar to Lyft and Uber. And what would happen is the drivers themselves will rate women at how hot they were.
Oh man.
Think about the can of worms that opens if that was here. Let me think about it.
For sure. And and how many of those types of apps are on the dark web, like we were just talking about earlier?
Yeah.
So
no, but definitely. I mean, exposure about the dark web. Whole fantasy about the dark web as that people don't realize, and I think light would hopefully educate others. You know, training in schools, this idea of training, active shooter training in school, that I know you have a huge stake in.
Absolutely.
Schools. I mean, that stuff is important. How much information do you give them to make them aware that this is really a danger, versus do you shelter them and put them in? And the other thing also is as people are coming forth and realizing that, do the due diligence. I think you nailed it. I mean, the recent incident I had with a certain individual calling someone out and being called out for mistaken identity is embarrassing. You can really ruin someone's life like that because you didn't do the due diligence. And this is the same for all these organizations. It's really do the due diligence and get the messaging right. Because if you don't do it right, you can seriously harm people. And that's unfortunately is what I feel and I'm seeing quite a bit of. It's not really, you know, having a voice. It's great to have a voice. And this is why we're here, have that voice, but the right way. A way we can collectively come together and do it, as you said, peacefully. And we're not seeing that, which I think is pretty disturbing. And I don't know whose fault it is. I don't know if it's the media's fault. I don't know if it's other platforms or social media, but you know, people really need to figure that one out for themselves as to.
And this is something that everyone can work on, right? You know, who am I following? You know, what am I perpetuating? What kind of message am I perpetuating out there? Am I just retweeting somebody else's statement, or can I add to it? Can I add something a little bit more positive? Exactly.
Yeah, positive.
So
it's disgusting. It's disgusting. You know, I mean, the one phrase that I always remember saying is like, apologies are always too late. after you make a mistake, right? And
Mhm.
this is 100% true. There's certain things you can do and apologize for, but certain things like this and certain actions is very damaging, especially when it's something that you can't take off and get rid of forever.
And when you put something on the internet, you know,
It's not going away. It is not going away.
Yep, yep. And look, we're all at fault from time to time. We all maybe, you know, hit send a little too fast or whatever. So
We're human.
it helps, right? It helps to be forgiving of people, or like you said, to do your due diligence, try and triple check before you say anything. So
just not on social media. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Don't do it on social media.
Yes, yes, yes. I have to myself feel better with that too. But in any event, I am super excited to get this going, the podcast. I think we have a lot of really interesting characters lined up to speak to. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, and eventually, hopefully, this will be something that we can do over a glass of wine and just talk openly with, because I think it'll make it more fun.
Sounds even better.
So keep in mind, it'll be a very candid conversation.
Love it. Listen, it's truth serum, right?
Truth serum. That's exactly it.